We're returning to that motion of no confidence in the Taoiseach Joan Burton. It was put down by the Independent Alliance. They're unhappy with the Labour leader's decision to appoint the former trade union leader David Begg as chairman of the National Pensions Authority. We'll be hearing from Shane Ross of the Independent Alliance in just a moment. First though, last week on this programme, David Begg said the Taoiseach was within her rights to make the appointment under government rules approved by the Oireachtas.
As part of the legislation which was approved by the government, approved by the Oireachtas, of which Deputy Ross is part. Now, I don't know whether, when that legislation was going through the Oireachtas, whether he challenged it or not, or whether he spoke on that legislation, or if he did challenge it, presumably the Oireachtas took his views into account and decided against it. If he didn't challenge it, why didn't he?
And that was David Begg. As I said, Shane Ross is here. He was making the point there. We heard Alex White making the point. Joan Burton has said the same thing, that she's acting within the rules. She's done nothing wrong here.
Yeah, he's absolutely correct about that. The rules were concocted by the government after a major controversy about John McNulty, who was parachuted onto the IMMA board by Fine Gael in order to qualify him for the Senate. Could I just correct him about one thing where he says they were laid before this legislation was laid before the Oireachtas? It wasn't. It didn't come before the Oireachtas at all. These are guidelines. These guidelines were never actually brought before the Oireachtas.
So this was never debated?
It was never debated in the Oireachtas at all.
Okay, so you didn't get a chance then to object to it?
Absolutely correct. He should know that. These guidelines actually were laid in the library very quietly one day. They were launched elsewhere by the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. So I just want to correct that. But
that though doesn't take away from the central point being made by him, by Alex White and by Joan Burton, which is that she's acting within the rules. Yeah,
the guidelines are, she is acting within the rules, and the rules are appalling. The rules were drawn up apparently so that we would never again have the sort of example of cronyism which had happened under this government and previous governments. But buried in the rules was what he referred to as item 914, which basically gives the minister the right to bypass all these rules, all these worthy rules, which are that there should be a public appointment system, and it gives the minister the right to appoint whoever she or he likes. The minister used that power to appoint David Begg, who was a Labour Party supporter.
David Begg, though, as pointed out by Alex White and others, has been dealing with employment issues, including pensions, for decades. He's well qualified for the job.
I have no idea whether he's well qualified for the job or not. He's certainly very well qualified to do lots of things, but he is not going through the interview procedure which everybody else has to go through. So we're never going to know whether he's qualified for the job. David Begg should be subjected to...
Well, you will know in the sense that he will go before the relevant Oireachtas committee to explain his expertise. He said he's happy to answer questions there.
He's already been appointed. What's the point of this? He goes before an Oireachtas committee which has a government majority on him, which doesn't ratify his appointment or criticise his appointment or change anything at all. He goes through the motions, and this is a breach of Labour Party and Fine Gael manifesto promises, which was that they were to be ratified by Oireachtas committees. They're not being ratified. David Begg was appointed. He's up on the website as having been appointed by the minister. We're going to go through the motions of him answering questions, which other people have done as well, but there will be no change whatsoever. A Labour Party supporter is going to be appointed.
That he wouldn't take the job if the Oireachtas committee said he wasn't suitable for it.
The Oireachtas committee has absolutely there's no way that the government, the Oireachtas committee with the government majority is going to say that. You know that, and I know that. Joan Burton will whip them into line and say, look, you're voting for David Begg. He is, as she said, a loyal Labour Party supporter. He's been a great supporter of the Labour movement. He's pushed social partnership and Labour Party policies over the years. He's going to get $20,000 a year for this job, and nobody else is going to be able to apply for it. Why, in this case, did a minister come in, and it's exposed today in the Daily Mail by Fergal Blaney, that this is the second time she's used this power to bypass the normal procedures.
According to that piece in the Daily Mail, other ministers are mentioned. Richard Bruton is also mentioned. Jed Nash, again of the Labour Party, is mentioned. But also Joe McHugh of Fine Gael is mentioned. They all use this exemption.
Yeah, that makes it worse. That's why it was put in there. It was put in there so that when they felt like it, they could put in people who they felt like putting in and bypass these procedures, which are very good otherwise.
Well, the point that they would make is they put in people who they know to be well qualified and suitable for the job.
That's what they say. But in fact, the history of Irish politics, and this is what the Independent Alliance is so against, is that insiders get these jobs when ministers want them to get. Parties appoint people who are supporters to key jobs. I mean, and David Begg said that this was not a crock of gold. This is 20,000 a year job. This is a lot of money to the sort of people you were talking about in your programme earlier.
So who then would you like to see in a job like this?
I would like to see a proper procedure. I would like to see a proper public procedure. I think the procedure that's been set up is a pretty good one, the public appointments system.
Minus this controversial clause.
But this
presumably.
controversial clause is an appalling one, which is a complete get-out. This has blown a complete hole in it. And it's just typical. You know, it's not just here in public appointments of this sort. Look at the judiciary. Look at the failure of this government to reform the way they appoint judges, where, again, political supporters are ruthlessly appointed by Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Labour to the judiciary, and this is just more of the same thing. Nothing has changed. This is going to go on and on and on.
All right, Shane Ross, thank you for joining us on the